Oh, hello there. You startled me. Welcome to the town library. If you're going to stay here, please lower your voice, or whisper like this. You are in a library after all. So, what can I do for you? The clock went off. It's a wonderful library here, you know. So what brings you here? Oh, you'd like to check out a book? All right. Do you have a library card? Wait a minute. Why do you look so familiar? Oh, I remember you. You came in last week for a library card. Yes, I remember. You were very, very eager. But you said that you had to go back to your house and move stuff back in. You just moved into town, didn't you? Well, I guess you must have been very busy unpacking and whatnot. Well, now that you've moved into your new nest, have you checked out any books yet? You haven't? How could you not use a library card? A library card is a key to other worlds. What other worlds am I talking about? These books, of course. There are so many books to choose from. Anything from mysteries to memoirs, we have it here in this library. We even have fantasy novels for all ages. Oh, I'm sorry. I got a little excited back there. And pardon the noise upstairs. There are some construction workers on the roof. I love being in this wonderful library. There are so many books here. Well, it looks like my little speech got your interest. So you actually wanted to check out a book? Excellent. Oh, you don't know which book to choose from? Well, that's all right. In fact, I actually have 5 books here that I think would be a perfect fit for you. I'll read you the first chapter from each one. Let me begin. First up, we have When Zachary Beaver Came to Town by Kimberly, Willis, Holt. As you can see, this is a very, very old copy. It's been read a lot. Chapter 1. Nothing ever happens in Antler, Texas. Nothing much at all. Until this afternoon, when an old blue Thunderbird pulls a trailer decorated with Christmas lights into the Dairy Maid parking lot. The red words painted on the trailer caused quite a buzz around town, and before an hour is up, half of an Antler is standing in line with $2 clutched in hand to see the fattest boy in the world. Since it's too late in the summer for firecrackers and too early for the Ladybug Waltz, Cal and I joined Miss Murdy May and the First Baptist Quilting Bee at the back of the line. Miss Murdy May wears a wide-brimmed straw hat. She claims that she's never exposed her skin to the sun. Even so, wrinkles fold into her face like an unironed shirt. She takes her job as town historian and librarian, much like myself. Seriously, also like myself. And as usual, her camera hangs around her neck. Toby, how's your mom? Fine, I say. That will be really something if she wins. Yes, ma'am, it will. My mouth says the words, but my mind is not wanting to settle on a picture of her winning. Mom dreams of following in the footsteps of her favorite singer, Tammy Wynette. Last month she entered a singing contest in Amarillo and won first place. She got a trophy and an all-expense-paid trip to Nashville for a week to enter the National Amateurs Country Music Competition and at the Grand Ole Opry. The winner gets to cut a record album. Cars and pickups pull into the Dairy Maid parking lot. Some people make no bones about it. They just get in line to see him. Others try to act like they don't know anything about the buzz. They enter the Dairy Maid, place their orders, and exit with Coke floats, chocolate-dipped cones, or curly-Q fries, then wander to the back of the line. They don't fool me. The line isn't moving because the big event hasn't started. Some skinny guy wearing a tuxedo, smoking a pipe, is taking the money and giving out green tickets. Cal could stand in line forever to relieve his curiosity. He knows more gossip than any old biddy in Antler because he gathers it down at the Cotton Gin where his dad and the other farmers drink coffee. I got better things to do than this, I tell Cal. Like eat. My stomach's been growling all the time now since I haven't had a decent meal since Mom left a few days ago. Not that she cooked much lately since she was getting ready for that stupid contest. But I miss the fried catfish and barbecue dinner she brought home from the Bolorama Cafe where she works. Oh, come on, Toby, Cal begs. He'll probably move out tomorrow and we'll never get another chance. He's just some fat kid. Heck, Malcolm Clifton probably has him beat hands down. Malcolm's mom claims he's big-boned, not fat, but we've seen him pack away 6 jumbo burgers. I sigh real big like my dad does when he looks at my report card filled with C's. Okay, I say, and I'm only waiting 10 more minutes. After that, I'm splitting. Al grins that stupid grin with his black tooth showing. He likes to brag that he got his black tooth playing football. But I know the real story. His sister Kate socked him good when he scratched up her Carole King album. Cal says he was sick of hearing "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman" every stinking day of his life. Scarlett Stalling walks toward the line, holding her bratty sister Tara's hand. Scarlett looks cool wearing a bikini top underneath an open white blouse and hip huggers that hit right below her belly button. With her golden tan and long, silky blonde hair, she could do a commercial for Coppertone. Scarlett doesn't go to the back of the line. She walks over to me. To me. Smiling, flashing that ultra-bright sex appeal smile and the tiny gap between her 2 front teeth. Cal grins, giving her the tooth, but I lower my eyelids, half-mast, and jerk my head back a little, as if to say, hey. Then she speaks. Hey, Toby, would y'all do me a favor? Sure, I squeak, killing my cool act in one split second. Scarlett flutters her eyes, and I suck in my breath. Take Tara in for me. She passes her little sister's sticky hand like she's handing over a dog's leash. She then squeezes her fingers into her pocket and pulls out 2 crumpled dollar bills. I would give anything to be one of those luggy dollar bills tucked into her pocket. She flips back her long blonde mane. I've got to get back home and get ready. Juan's dropping by soon. The skin on my chest prickles. Mom is right. Scarlett Stalling is a flirt. Mom always told me, you better stay a spittin' distance from that girl. Her mother had a bad reputation when I went to school, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Cal punches my shoulder. Great going, ladies' man. I watch Scarlett's tight jeans sway toward her house so she can get ready for the only Mexican guy in Antler Junior High. Juan always shaves. He's a head taller than the rest of the guys, 2 heads taller than me. That gives him an instant ticket to play first string on our basketball team. even though he's slow-footed and a lousy shot. Whenever I see him around town, a number 5 iron golf club swing set aside. I don't plan to ever give him a reason to use it. Fatty, fatty, 2x4, Tara chimes as she stares at the trailer. Can't get through the kitchen door. Shut up, squirt, I mutter. Miss Murdy May frowns at me. Tara yanks on my arm. She hollers. You said shut up. Scarlet! She rises on her toes, as if that makes her louder. Toby said shut up to me. But it's too late. Scarlet has already disappeared across the street. She's probably home smearing lip gloss on those pouty lips, while I hold her whiny sister's lollipop fingers, standing next to my black-toothed friend, waiting to see the fattest boy in the world. Next, we have 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. Chapter 1. A Shifting Reef. The year 1866 was marked by an unusual incident, a mysterious and puzzling phenomenon which doubtless no one has yet forgotten. This excitement was not confined to merchants, common sailors, sea captains, shippers, and naval officers of all countries, but also interested the governments of many states on the 2 continents. For some time past, vessels had been met by, quote-unquote, an enormous thing, a long object, spindle-shaped, occasionally phosphorescent. My goodness. And infinitely larger and more rapid in its movements than a whale. The facts relating to this apparition, entered in various logbooks, agreed in most respects as to the shape of the object or creature in question, the untiring rapidity of its movements, its surprising power of locomotion, and the peculiar life with which it seemed endowed. If it was a whale, it surpassed in size all those hitherto known to science. Taking into consideration the mean of observations made at divers times, rejecting the timid estimate of those who assigned to this object a length of 200 feet, equally with the exaggerated opinions which set it down as measurement a mile in width and 3 in length, we might fairly conclude that this mysterious being greatly surpassed all dimensions admitted by scholars of the day, if it existed at all. And that it did exist was an undeniable fact, and with that tendency that predisposes the human mind in favor of the marvelous, we can understand the excitement produced across the world by this supernatural apparition. As to classing it in the lists of fables, the idea was out of the question. On the 20th of July, 1866, the steamer Governor Higginson of the Calcutta and Bernack Steam Navigation Company met this moving mass 5 miles off the east coast of Australia. Captain Baker thought at first that he was in the presence of an unknown sandbank. He was even preparing to determine its exact position when 2 columns of water, projected by the mysterious object, shot with a hissing noise 150 feet up into the air. Now, unless the sandbank had been submitted into the intermittent eruption of a geyser, the Governor Higginson had to do then with one other than an aquatic mammal, known until then, which spouted columns of water mixed with air and vapor from its blowholes. Similar facts were observed on the 23rd of July in the same year in the Pacific Ocean by the Columbus of the West India and Pacific Steam Navigation Company. But this extraordinary creature could transport itself from one place to another with surprising speed, as in an interval of 3 days, the Governor Higginson and the Columbus had observed it at 2 different points of the chart, separated by a distance of more than 700 nautical leagues. 15 days later, 2,000 miles farther off, the Helvetia of the Compagnie Nationale and the Shannon of the Royal Mail Steamship Company, sailing to windward in that part of the Atlantic that lies between the United States and Europe, respectively signaled the monster to each other at 42 degrees 15 north latitude and 60 degree 35 west long. In these simultaneous observations, they thought themselves justified in estimating the minimum length of the mammal at more than 350 feet, as the Shannon and Helvetia were of smaller dimensions than the creature, though they each measured over 300 feet. Now the largest whales, those which frequent those parts of the sea around the Aleutian, Kalamac, and Ungullich Islands. I have never heard of those names before, so I apologize. I'm a librarian, but I'm not so good with pronouncing words. Have never exceeded the length of 50 to 60 yards when they attained that. In every place of great resort, the monster was the fashion. They sang of it in the cafes, ridiculed it in the papers, and represented it on stage. All kinds of stories were circulated regarding it. Caricatures of every gigantic and imaginary creature, from the white whale, the terrible Moby Dick of subarctic regions, to the immense kraken, whose tentacles could entangle a ship of 500 tons and hurry it into the abyss of the ocean, appeared in papers. The legends of ancient times were revived. Then burst forth the unending argument between the believers and the unbelievers in the societies of the wise and the scientific journals. Quote, unquote, the question of the monster inflamed all minds. Editors of scientific journals, quarreling with believers in the supernatural, spilled seas of ink in the course of this memorable campaign. In the course of the first months of the year 1867, the question seemed buried, never to revive, when new facts were brought before the public. The creature was no longer a scientific problem to be solved, but a real danger seriously to be avoided. The question took quite another shape. The monster became a small island, a rock, a reef, but a reef of indefinite and shifting proportions. On the 5th of March, 1867, the Moravian of the Montreal Ocean Company, finding herself at 27 degrees 30 latitude and 72 degrees 15 long during the night, struck a rock on her starboard quarter, marked in no chart for that part of the sea. Under the combined efforts of the wind and its 400 horsepower, it was going at a rate of 13 knots. Had it not been for the great strength of the hull of the Moravian, she would have been broken by the shock and gone down with the 237 passengers she was bringing home from Canada. The accident happened about 5 o'clock in the morning, as day was breaking. The officers on the quarter-deck hurried to the aft of the vessel. They examined the sea with the most careful attention. They saw nothing but a strong eddy, about 3 cables' length distance, as if the surface had been violently agitated. The exact bearings of the place were taken, and the Moravian continued its route without apparent damage. Had it struck a submerged rock or an enormous wreck? They could not tell, but on examination of the ship's bottom when undergoing repairs, it was found that part of her keel was broken. This fact, so grave in itself, might perhaps have been forgotten, like many others, if 3 weeks later, had it not been reenacted under similar circumstances. But thanks to the nationality of the victim of the shock, and thanks to the reputation of the company to which the vessel belonged, the circumstances became extensively circulated. Ah, the clock has struck. It is noon. On the 13th of April, 1867, the sea being beautiful and the breeze favorable, the Scotia of the Cunard Company line found herself at 50 degrees 12 long and 45 degrees 37 lat. She was going at the speed of 13.5 knots. At 17 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, whilst the passengers were assembled for lunch in the Grand Saloon, a slight shock was felt on the hull of the Scotia, on her quarter, a little aft of the paddle. The Scotia had not struck, but she had been struck, and seemingly by something sharp and penetrating rather than blunt. The shock had been so slight that no one had been alarmed, had it not been for the shouts of the carpenter's watch, who rushed onto the bridge exclaiming, "We are sinking! We are sinking!" At first the passengers were very frightened, but Captain Anderson hastened to reassure them. The danger could not be imminent. The Scotia, divided into seven compartments by strong partitions, could brave any leak with impunity. Captain Anderson went down immediately into the hold. He found that the sea was pouring into the 5th compartment, and the rapidity of the influx proved that the force of the water was considerable. Fortunately, this compartment did not hold the boilers, or the fires would have been immediately extinguished. Captain Anderson ordered the engines to be stopped at once, and one of the men went down to ascertain the extent of the damage. Some minutes afterward, they discovered the existence of a large hole, 2 yards in diameter, in the ship's hull. Such a leak could not be stopped, and the Scotia, her paddles half submerged, was obliged to continue her course. She was then 300 miles from Cape Clear, and, after 3 days' delay, which caused great uneasiness in Liverpool, she entered the company's dock. Engineers examined the Scotia, which was put in dry dock. They could scarcely believe their eyes. At 2.5 yards below the watermark was a regular rent, in front of an isosceles triangle. The broken place in the iron plates was so perfectly defined that it could not have been more neatly done by a punch. It was clear, then, that the instrument producing the perforation was not of a common stamp, and, after having been driven with prodigious strength, and piercing an iron plate 1 3/8 inches thick, had withdrawn itself by a backward motion. Such was the last fact, which resulted in more exciting and torrent of public opinion. From this moment, all unlucky casualties, which could not be otherwise accounted for, were put down to the monster. Upon this imaginary creature rested the responsibility for all unaccountable shipwrecks, which unfortunately were considerable. For of 300,000 ships whose loss was annually recorded at Lloyd's, the number of sailing and steamships supposed to be totally lost, from the absence of all news, amounted to no less than 200. Now it was the quote-unquote monster who justly or unjustly was accused of their disappearance, and thanks to it, communication between the different continents became more and more dangerous. The public sharply demanded that the seas should be relieved from this formidable cetacean, a member of the whale family, at any price. Next, we have Life of Pi by Yan Martell. This is another book that has been read a lot. Look how worn out it is. But let's begin reading, shall we? Chapter 1. My suffering left me sad and gloomy. Academic study and the steady, mindful practice of religion slowly brought me back to life. I have kept up what some people could consider my strange religious practices. After 1 year of high school, I attended the University of Toronto and took a double major bachelor's degree. My majors were religious studies and zoology. My fourth year thesis for religious studies concerned certain aspects of the cosmogony theory of Isaac Luria, the great 16th century Kabbalist from Safed. My zoology thesis was a functional analysis of the thyroid gland of the three-toed sloths. I chose the sloth because of its demeanor, calm, quiet, and introspective. I did something to soothe my shattered self. There were two-toed sloths, and there were three-toed sloths, the case being determined by the forepaws of the animal, since all sloths have 3 claws on their hind paws. I had the great luck one summer of studying the three-toed sloth in situ in the equatorial jungles of Brazil. It is a highly intriguing creature. Its only real habit is indolence. It sleeps or rests on average 20 hours a day. Our team tested the sleep habits of 5 wild three-toed sloths by placing on their heads in the early evening, after they had fallen asleep, bright red plastic dishes filled with water. We found them still in the same place the next morning, the water of the dishes swarming with insects. The sloth is at its busiest at sunset, using the word busy here in the most relaxed sense. It moves along the bough of a tree in its characteristic upside-down position at the speed of roughly 400 meters an hour. On the ground, it crawls to its next tree at the rate of 250 meters an hour when motivated, which is 440 times slower than a motivated cheetah. Unmotivated, it covers 4 to 5 meters in an hour. The three-toed sloth is not well informed about the outside world. On a scale of 2 to 10, where 2 represents unusual dullness and 10 extreme acidity, Beaver, 1926, gave the sloth's sense of taste, touch, sight, and hearing a rating of 2, and its sense of smell a rating of 3. If you came upon a sleeping three-toed sloth in the wild, 2 or 3 nudges should suffice to awaken it. It will then look sleepily in every direction but yours. Why should it look about and is uncertain, since the sloth sees everything in a magoo-like blur. As for hearing, the sloth is not so much deaf as uninterested in sound. Beaver reported that firing guns next to sleeping or feeding sloths elicited little reaction, and the sloth's slightly better sense of smell should not be overestimated. They are said to be able to sniff and avoid decaying branches, but Bullock, 1968, reported that sloths fall to the ground clinging to decaying branches often. How does it survive, you might ask? Precisely by being so slow. Sleepiness and slothfulness kept it out of harm's way, away from the notice of jaguars, ocelots, harpy eagles, and anacondas. A sloth's hair hairs shelter an algae that is brown during the dry season and green during the wet season, so the animal blends in with the surrounding moss and foliage and looks like a nest of white ants or of squirrels, or like nothing at all but a part of a tree. The three-toed sloth lives a peaceful vegetarian life in perfect harmony with its environment. A good-natured smile is forever on its lips, reported Turler, 1966. I have seen that smile with my own eyes. I am not given to projecting human traits and emotions onto animals, but many a time during that month in Brazil, looking up at sloths in repose, I felt I was in the presence of upside-down yogis deep in meditation, or hermits deep in prayer, wise beings whose intense imaginative lives were beyond the reach of my scientific probing. Sometimes I got my majors mixed up. A number of my fellow religious studies students, muddled agnostics who did not know which way was up, were in the thrall of reason. That fool's gold for the bright reminded me of the three-toed sloth. And the three-toed sloth, such a beautiful example of the miracle of life, reminded me of God. I never had problems with my fellow scientists. Scientists are a friendly, atheistic, hard-working, beer-drinking lot whose minds were preoccupied with sex, chess, and baseball when they are not preoccupied with science. I was a very good student, if I may say so myself. I was tops at St. Michael's College for 4 years in a row. I got every possible student award from the Department of Zoology. If I got none from the Department of Religious Studies, it is simply because there are no student awards in this department. The rewards of religious study are not in mortal hands. We all know that. I would have given the Governor General's academic medal. I would have received the Governor General Academic Medal, the University of Toronto's highest undergraduate award, of which no small number of illustrious Canadians have been recipients, were it not for a beef-eating pink boy with a neck like a tree trunk and a temperament of unbearable good cheer. I still smart a little at the slight. When you've suffered a great deal in life, each additional pain is both unbearable and trifling. My life is like a memento mori painting from European art. There is always a grinning skull at my side to remind me of the folly of human ambition. I mock this skull. I look at it and I say, "You've got the wrong fellow. You may not believe in life, but I don't believe in death. Move on." The skull snickers and moves ever closer, but that doesn't surprise me. The reason death sticks so closely to life isn't biological necessity. It's envy. Life is so beautiful that death has fallen in love with it. A jealous, possessive love that grabs at what it can. Life leaps over oblivion lightly, losing only a thing or two of no importance, and gloom is but the passing shadow of a cloud. The pink boy also got the nod from the Rhodes Scholarship Committee. I love him, and I hope his time at Oxford was a rich experience. If Lakshmi, goddess of wealth, one day favors me bountifully, Oxford is the fifth on the list of cities I would like to visit before I pass on, after Mecca, Varanasi, Jerusalem, and Paris. I have nothing to say of my working life, only that a tie is a noose, and inverted though it is, it will hang a man none the less if he is not careful. I love Canada. I miss the heat of India, the food, the house lizards on the walls, the musicals on the silver screens, the cows wandering the streets, the crows cawing, even the talk of cricket matches. But I love Canada. It is a great country, much too cold for good sense, inhabited by compassionate, intelligent people with bad hairdos. Anyway, I have nothing to go home to in Pondicherry. Richard Parker has stayed with me. I have never forgotten him. Dare I say I miss him? I do. I miss him. I still see him in my dreams. They are nightmares mostly, but nightmares tinged with love. Such is the strangest strangeness of the human heart. I still cannot understand how he could abandon me so unceremoniously without any sort of goodbye, without looking back even once. That pain is like an axe that chops at my heart. My goodness, those construction workers up there are really working loud. They're giving me for reading, but that's not going to stop me. I'm going to read to you. The doctors and nurses at the hospital in Mexico were incredibly kind to me, and the patients too. Victims of cancer or car accidents, once they heard my story, they hobbled and wheeled over to see me. They and their families, though none of them spoke English and I spoke no Spanish. They smiled at me, shook my hand, patted me on the head, left gifts of food and clothing on my bed. They moved me to uncontrollable fits of laughing and crying. Within a couple of days, I could stand, even make 2-3 steps, despite nausea, dizziness, and general weakness. Blood tests revealed that I was anemic and that my level of sodium was very high and my potassium low. My body retained fluids and my legs swelled up tremendously. I looked as if I had been grafted with a pair of elephant legs. My urine was a deep, dark yellow going on to brown. After a week or so, I could walk just about normally, and I could wear shoes if I didn't lace them up. My skin healed, though I still have scars on my shoulders and back. The first time I turned a tap on, its noisy, wasteful, superabundant gush was such a shock that I became incoherent and my legs collapsed beneath me and I fainted in the arms of a nurse. The first time I went to an Indian restaurant in Canada, I used my fingers. The waiter looked at me critically and said, "Fresh off the boat, are you?" I blanched. My fingers, which a second before had been taste buds, savoring the food a little ahead of my mouth, became dirty under his gaze. They froze like criminals caught in the act. I didn't dare lick them. I wiped them guiltily on my napkin. He had no idea how deeply those words wounded me. They were like nails being driven into my flesh. I picked up the knife and fork. I had hardly ever used such instruments. My hands trembled. My sambar lost its taste. Next we have King of the Wind, the story of the Godolphin Arabian by Margaret Henry, illustrated by Wesley Dennis. See the nice illustrations there? Chapter 1. The Fast of Ramadan. In the northwest slice of Africa, known as Morocco, a horse boy stood, with broom in hand, in the vast courtyard of the royal stables of the Sultan. He was waiting for dusk to fall. All day he had eaten nothing. He had not even tasted the jujubes tucked in his turban, nor the enormous purple grapes that spilled over the palace wall into the stable yard. He had tried not to sniff the rich, warm fragrance of ripening pomegranates, for this was the sacred month of Ramadan, when, day after day, all faithful Mohammedans neither eat nor drink from the dawn before sunrise until the moment of sunset. Look at this beautiful illustration of the courtyard. This is a very beautiful book as well. The boy Agba had not minded the fast for himself. It was part of his religion. But when Signor Ahmed, chief of the grooms, commanded that the horses, too, observe the fast, Agba's dark eyes smoldered with anger. "It is the order of the Sultan," the Signor had announced to the horse boys, and he cuffed Agba on the head when the boy showed his disapproval. Of the 12,000 horses in the Sultan's stables, Agba had charge of 10. He fed and watered them and polished their coats and cleaned their stalls. Best of all, he wheeled the whole string into the courtyard at one time for their exercise. My goodness! What is going on with those construction workers up there? I don't know what kind of improvements the library is going to go through, but they better be good. Anyway, there was one of the 10 horses to whom Agba had lost his heart. She was a bay mare, as fleet as a gazelle, with eyes that studied him in whatever he did. The other 9 horses he would lead out to the common water trough to drink. But for this bright bay, he would fill a water cask from a pure spring beyond the palace gates. Then he would hold it while the mare sucked the water, her eyelashes brushing his fingers as she drank. For long moments after she had drunk her fill, she would gaze at him while the cooling water dribbled from her muzzle onto his hands. It was the mare that worried Agba now, as she worked to fill in the time until the hour of sunset. The courtyard was already swept clean, but Agba pushed his palm leaf broom, as if he worked sweeping all his thoughts into a little mound for the wind to carry away. At last he hung his broom on an iron hook alongside an endless row of brooms and went to the mare. Her stall door was closed so that the fragrance of late clover would not drift into to prick her appetite. He found her asleep, laying on her side, her great belly distended by the little colt soon to be born. Agba noticed with a heavy feeling in his chest that the fast was telling on the mare. He could read it in the sunken places above each eye, a harshness of her coat. But soon the fast would be over. It was the last day of the month, and even now the sun was sinking below the gray-green olive trees that fringed the courtyard. Oh my goodness, all that construction. There was no sound anywhere, not from the palace walls beyond, nor from the quarters over the stables where the horse boys lived. The whole world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for dusk to fall. Small voices of insects and birds were beginning to pierce the quiet. Twilight toads piping on their bassoons, crickets chirping, wood doves cooing, and afar off in the Atlas Mountains a hyena began to laugh. These were forerunners of the darkness. It would only be a short time now. Agba turned toward the east, his eyes on the minaret of the mosque. It was a sharp needle pricking the blood-red reflection of the sun. He gazed fixedly at it until his eyes smarted. At last, a figure in white robes emerged from the tower. It was the public crier. He was sounding his trumpet. He was crying 4 times to the 4 winds of heaven. The fast of Ramadan was at an end. And here we can see an illustration of that man. The air went wild with noise. 12,000 horses recognized the summons and neighed their hunger. The royal stables seethed like an anthill. Horseboys swarmed out of the corridors into the courtyard. From the hoods of their cloaks, from waistbands and vests, they took dates and raisins and almonds and popped them noisily into their mouths. They stripped the grapes from their vines. They ate it with boisterous abandon. Some plunged their faces into the troughs and sucked the water as if they were horses. Agba did not join the other horse boys. He returned to the mare. Moving slowly as not to frighten her, he reached under the saddle hung on the wall and found the water vessel he had filled and hidden there an hour ago. He poured the water into a basin and waited for the mare to awaken. As if she had heard in her dreams the sound made by the water, she woke with a jerk and struggled to her feet. She came to Agba and drank. She then raised her head, letting the water slobber from her lips. Agba waited motionless, knowing she would want more and more. Her deep brown eyes studied him as if to say, "You are the source of all that is good." A great happiness welled up inside Agba. He nodded, seeming to understand her thoughts. He then waited while she drank again and again. When Agba came out of the mare's stall, the other boys were beginning to lead their horses to the common trough to drink. He must hurry now if he hoped to get his corn ration first. He picked up a bag of hemp and ran through the maze of corridors and down a steep staircase to the underground granary. At the entrance stood Signor Ahmed, chief of the grooms. Signor Ahmed was dark and bearded. In his right hand he carried a knotted stick, and from the sash at his waist hung 100 keys. When he saw Agba, he gripped the boy's shoulder with fingers as strong as the claws of an eagle. "Why do you not eat with the other slave boys?" he asked in his cracked voice. Then, with a sharp look, he released Agba and began peeling an orange with his fingertips. His beady eyes did not leave Agba's face as he ate the orange, making loud sucking noises to show how juicy and good it was. Agba gulped. He studied his brown toes. "Is it the mare?" The boy's eyes flew to the signor's. "It is tonight her hour?" Slowly, gravely, Agba nodded. "Tonight, then," the signor said, as he wiped his mouth on his mantle and began fumbling for the key for the granary. "Tonight you will not go to your quarters to sleep. You will move the mare to the brood mare stable. You will remain on watch and call me when she is ready to foal. The all-seeing eye of Allah will be upon you." Agba's heart fluttered like birds' wings. The chief of the grooms was letting him stay with his mare. He forgot all the cuffs and sharp words. He bowed low, impatient to hear the sound of the key turning the great lock, impatient for the creaking of the door and the mingled odors of corn and barley. They scraped. The keys scraped. The door creaked open. The warm, mellow smells leaked out. Signor Ahmed stood aside. Agba slipped past him into the darkness. Quickly, his sensitive fingers sought the good, sound ears of corn. He filled his bag with them. Then he turned and fled up the stairs. Lastly, we have The Swan's Child. By Sjoerd Kuyper, illustrated by Yan Jude, and translated by Patricia Crampton. This is one of my favorite books. Chapter 1. Like a great white ship, the Swan sailed into the little harbor. On her back sat a baby. It made a pretty picture, the naked child on the ship of white feathers. The child's little arms were clasped around the swan's neck, and it sat warmly between the great wings. The animals from the little harbor town ran out of their houses to the quay. They made encouraging noises, but the swan came no closer. She drifted quite silently in the middle of the harbor. The baby cried. The animals ran back to their houses and reappeared with bread and sponge fingers, rusks and bananas. The pig brought a bottle of milk. They stood in a row on the quay, making their encouraging noises, but the swan came no closer. Here we can see all of the animals. Let's see what happens. Let's go then, thought the pig. He tossed the bottle in the great ark into the water, just beside the swan. The other animals followed his example. You could see that the swan knew what was good for the baby. First she swam to the bread, then to the bottle of milk, and to a banana. The rest she ate herself. When there was nothing left, the baby let go of the swan's neck and tumbled over backwards among the feathers. The swan laid her beak against the baby's cheek. The animals on the quay whispered softly. The sea rocked the harbor. The child and the swan fell asleep. We must catch them, the kingfisher told the pig. It can't work, can it? A swan and a baby? But the pig thought it could. As long as we feed them well, he said. And so they did. Every day the animals from the little harbor town threw milk and bread and bananas to the child, and rusks and sponge cake biscuits to the swan. Every day the baby grew fatter. The swan sank lower and lower in the water, but she did not come any closer to the quay. The pig thought, who is this child? And who is the swan? Can they understand each other? Are they related? Where do they come from? The child is getting too heavy, the kingfisher told the pig. Only the swan's head is still above the water, and a little bit of neck. But the baby loves it, said the pig. You can see that in every way. It was true. The water was already above its navel, but the child splashed with flat palms and crowded and trampled. And look at that. The trampling helped. One day, the swan was lying so still and deep in the water that she could no longer move. The animals from the little harbor town held their breath. But the baby trampled its little legs and used its hands as oars. It swept them through the water, one by one, from front to back, left, right, and there they moved slowly forward. The child steered the swan towards the quarry. There were steps there, stone steps from the bottom of the sea up to the high quay. The child steered the swan towards the steps. The swan's breast came to rest on the step just under the water. The child set its little feet on the step, left, right, beside the swan, and stood up. It stood up. Look at that. It is standing up. And that was when everyone saw that it was a little girl. She walked up the steps. She walked, with legs bowed from sitting on the swan all the time. But she walked. She climbed. The pig took her in his arms and walked off the quay, away from the harbor. The little girl did not look round. The swan shook out her feathers and swam into the harbor, away from the steps, out of the harbor, away from the child. She did not look round. But when she was sailing on the sea like a great white ship, that was when she stretched her neck, lifted her head up to the sky, and sang. The pig took the child home with him and dressed her in a lovely little white dress made of lace. He picked her up and carried her to the looking-glass. Together they looked at the pig and the little girl in the glass. The little girl said, "Swan," but the pig called her Josie. I know that look in your eyes. You've been inspired, intrigued, perhaps awestruck. You want to explore the library, don't you? And see all the books we have. Well, take your time and look around. Pick out as many books as you want. Come up and meet me at the front desk whenever you're ready. Enjoy. There's so many worlds to explore here. So many.